Hear me?
Nice.
Hello.
I can hear you. Look at
Nice
that.
to see you.
Isn't it crazy? Like, I work with technology every day, but when it actually works, it still feels like magic. Yeah.
Well, here we are. We're doing a first recording on a Raw podcast.
It's alive.
Hawkman Raw.
Hawkman Raw.
Hawkman
How
Raw.
the bloody hell are you, man?
I'm good. How you going?
I'm good. I'm just admiring that chair of yours.
Matt, I love this chair. This chair is my creative thinking chair. I've had it for about almost 6 years.
Did you buy it here? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's my reading chair. Like, it's an old classic wingback chair. It's a reading chair. And I sometimes just sit and if I want to be creative, I just got my creative scribbling book and I just creative my creative chair. So I call it my creative thinking chair.
And where did you buy the chair from?
It's an Ibsen wingback chair from Dare Gallery. So it's like one of their designer unique pieces for, it's called Ibsen chair.
I was actually so happy. Do you know Guns N' Roses? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You know Slash?
Yes.
Yeah. So the infamous hat that Slash wears. The story goes that they were so dirt poor, and he was literally walking the flea markets in LA, and walked past this shop and saw the hat, and just needed to have it, and went in and literally stole the hat, and wore it that night to I think it was Whiskey A Go Go or one of the clubs in LA, and that became his signature from there on. Yeah.
Signature, right?
Yeah,
nice.
I have this great image of you running down the street with the chair, just
big to half inch, pinch it. But I like it. I've not been using it as much. Well, I'm using it a damn sight more lately. Work from home in the studio, right? But when I'm in traveling, I don't get to enjoy it as much. So it's been moved front and center, kind of into easier access right now.
How are you finding this whole ISO thing, man?
Say that again, mate.
How are you finding the whole ISO thing?
Yes, this is kind of normal for me, right? I've got a couple of pieces I've written on this because this is pretty much normal life for me. If I'm not on the road touring and doing stage shows and stuff, I'm at home alone. And last year I was writing at home alone. I was literally here alone for all of that stuff. So it sounds a bit weird, but this is kind of semi-normal, just a bit more in my face, I guess. But it's not completely foreign to me, this concept. How are you going?
Yeah, good, man. It's funny. I was saying to someone today this whole idea of everyone saying that I've lost my freedom, and then actually questioning, well, what did you do with your freedom before all of this happened? Yeah, like were you actually using that freedom effectively, or were you just longing for the hours that you could sit at home in front of Netflix? Because life just handed that to you in a parcel. So if that's what you wanted, that's what you got. But it's going to be interesting. I think this whole new world that we talk about. What is that going to look like for people?
Completely. And I know you've been having conversations, right, with a lot of the small businesses, with the entrepreneurs, with the startups, with some of the businesses from the in crowd. And for this raw session, I know you flagged briefly that you're finding a lot of them are kind of thinking, oh, well, when the world gets back to normal, right? And you're finding that a lot of them are just kind of biding their time, doing the things you said there, kind of kill their time on Netflix, whatever, just waiting for the world to get back to normal. How much of that are you finding is happening, Chris?
I think, again, the problem there is this idea that there's like one big giant switch. Yeah, so we've got this romantic idea of ScoMo sitting in his lounge room, kind of just waiting during the countdown with all his advisors just saying, okay, go. Flick the switch and the world's back to normal. And we all go out in the streets and dance and celebrate like it was the end of the war. And the reality is that day is just not going to come. There is no big switch that's going to happen, and then overnight everything goes back to normal. So, sort of working with the businesses to remind them that there's a strategy play here, and they need to change their idea of what life as normal looks like, because it will be a new normal. But two, understanding that that's not going to happen as a flick the switch overnight back to business. So potentially, depending on which industry you're in, depends on the level of impact that has. Obviously, if you're in travel and your whole business was kind of built around overseas travel, that is the final lever to go in the series of switches. So, but does that mean that you sit and wait for the final lever to go? before you actually activate something with the other levers that get switched over the next 12 months.
No, absolutely not. I'd say
Yeah.
to that. And I know, like, we spoke about this briefly, but I think when this all panned out, and I remember it seems like a millennium ago already, but when that massive change happened, you and I jumped on a broadcast for travel industry specific because it was first hit. You remember that one? And we were talking about some things already, and one of those was adaptation, right? Now, I know for me, from that day, even before that day, because events was no different than travel, live events, my calendar got wiped from a live event perspective. And I went the other way. I instantly that day started already working on my strategy. I didn't even get around to really looking at a deep dive of the government support stuff to help me here and now until after I'd gone through my adaptation piece and kind of had some way forward with that, because I thought that was more important. I kind of got that it wasn't going to be a short-term thing. And the sooner I got on the front foot in adapting, the better. And so I'm only just getting around now to looking at, okay, what can we do support-wise that can help my business through? But I've got those strategy pieces in play. Yeah. And I think what you're describing is the business that have gone the other way. They've kind of, a lot of them, and rightly so, what support can I get? But then waiting for that switch to go on. And even when it does, some things will be changed permanently. And that's, so it's, regardless, even it's going to take time for this, once the switch gets flicked in stages, to get back to some sort of semi-normal. But even with that, the new normal is not going to be the old normal.
Yeah. And it's funny, like the other thing we talk about a lot in startup land too is that cause and effect. So we kind of look at that, what they in traditional business strategy call scenario planning, which is kind of working on the idea that the most basic way to forecast is to take X, work out Y, and that must mean Z. And I know many a forecast spreadsheet that's kind of been built on that assumption, but a true kind of, business strategist will look at that and say, well, that's cute. But now let's throw some scenarios in there. Yeah. Let's work on the idea that you lose this or this doesn't happen. And so you look at the things that are outside of your control, you measure what that looks like, and then you work it backwards for signposts. So take the Olympics, for example. I mean, as much as it took them a lifetime to make a decision that they were going to pull the pin on, 2020 in Tokyo, the reality is the scenario planning behind that, they knew the decision already, and they knew what those signposts were going to look like. And the signposts that would indicate that they need to cancel were not a message for the government to say cancel now. It was, well, if this happens, then we'll need to do this. If this happens, we'll need to do that. And so we're always working with businesses to kind of, in the good times, to work on the idea of what could potentially be those signposts that indicate you're going down a path that will have a potential impact on the business. I think now we're talking about reverse scenario planning. So you do that planning because you don't know what the effect is going to be. So you look at the causes and you kind of build to that. Whereas this one is the reverse, where you're kind of looking at it and saying, okay, the words actually got thrown out the start of this week saying road to recovery. So what does that road look like? And so the first step is X. So the next step is Y. What can I do in that world? So yes, that still exists, but I can do this. So as those restrictions start to ease off, actually start to grow the business out. And I think most people would discover that by the time it gets to that last lever, that their business is completely different.
Now, I love how you're describing the signposts. I want to come back and ask you something about that and think about some of those specific signposts that you're working with businesses on. But even in a normal world, I'd link this to a sales business, right? I mean, I've built literally bespoke sales methodologies for organizations, $1 billion to SMBs. And with their sales team, even when they've got forecasting, what's that forecasting and targets based on? It's based on existing, right? Hey, this year we've got $1 million of revenue. And this year we've got $100 million of revenue. This year we've got $1.2 billion. Now we're going to set the targets for next year. And those targets invariably are going to be an increase. There's one or two businesses where I've worked with where they actually had negative targets, and we're looking at industries there that were going through pain of transitioning from print to online. So obviously they realized they couldn't maintain their print the same way. They've got negative targets. But the point is this: most businesses, when they're forecasting, they look at their sales data, they look at their existing, and they build a target of growth. But here's why I often say them is that you've got to, the first signpost I would say alone is you're assuming a lot, because you're assuming you're going to retain every client. And I would say a healthier position, and I always say, is to whatever your financial year, whether it's Q1 to 4 or fiscal or calendar, you've got to consider that entire revenue has been wiped to zero, because it's not assured. It's not guaranteed. Yeah. Every year it's starting fresh. Now you can increase the likelihood of retaining that by having a solid account management structure and doing certain things that create customer experiences. You can measure and retain a certain portion as a safety net, yes. But to actually assume that your sales figures are always going to be from that starting point is actually a flaw I find a lot of businesses make as well. You're assuming continual growth without considering what you're saying there, Chris. What are the signposts? Yeah. So what are some of the signposts you've been finding, you've been talking with the guys around? Because this is obviously unusual times. I mean, I'll talk to normal times, but what's some of those signposts you've been building with them?
I think just quickly getting back to your last comment, though, because that's, the signpost is one thing that talking through, and it will be different for everyone and different industries. But I think the other thing is when you start to look at, it's okay to make assumptions. I think, the reality is, life is built on generalizations and assumptions. I have to assume when I wake up in the morning and I put my feet out on the side of the bed to get out of bed that the floor's going to stay there. So I'm going to assume that. Otherwise, every morning is a messing with my head of, can I do this? So you've got to make some sort of assumptions along the way. With the customer, especially, I don't mind people applying assumptions to that. But the first question I'm going to ask them is, do you actually have any ownership at all of the customer?
Yes.
It's a very harsh way to look at it, because you never own people, but ownership of a customer is, at the very least, do you know who your customer is, and do you have an ability to be able to communicate with them? And I think that, for me, is the scary one, because restaurant industry especially has had the double hit right now that, one, we're going to take away all your patronage overnight, and you've got to work out a way to deal with that. But two, here's a lifeline, but the lifeline involves us owning the customer. And that's Uber Eats, and that's Deliveroo, and so these restaurants have found the ability to be able to trade without having any ownership of the customer. It's taking them further away from what their goal needs to be, and they're giving away 40% in the meantime of the revenue. So some of these lifelines that are thrown out are not necessarily the best ones for industry to grab hold of.
Not for long term.
Reminding everyone, it's a strategy first play. With stimulus, with support, and with resources, you need to look at the potential sting in the tail of all of them, because they will, in some way or form, have an impact on your business. Yeah.
Very true. Very true. I hadn't sat and thought, Michael, I know you're doing some industry-specific trends. I'm sure that hospitality was one of them, Chris, with the hub stuff you're doing. I mean, when I said that before, the point about assumptions, you're absolutely correct. Like, it's good. We have to make safe assumptions. What I was saying about sales figures, it's kind of like a soccer game, though. When you're in the middle of a soccer match and you're 1-0 up, it's not healthy to assume you're going to remain 1-0 up. A better mindset is at 0-0, you go again, you attack again. So when I'm talking sales, that's why I say it's healthier from a hunting mindset of always assuming 0-0. Don't assume your revenue is solid. Don't assume that existing revenue is solid, because it forces you to treat that customer uniquely better every time. Does that make sense? So that's the first part. But I'd say the assumptions you could make is assuming you've got solid touch points, experience points, things that you generate, as you call it there, owning the customer, where it's not through third party. You can make some safe assumptions on that ecosystem that you build up data around for sure. But even in an ideal world, you've got, let's say, the best businesses, very few of them would maintain and retain 100% of customers each year, because you've got natural attrition. People die. Businesses move areas. Business gets sold and change hands, and they have preferred vendors, and it's not you. There's all these other just general life things anyway that happens that always messes with your sales numbers existing anyway. So even when whatever your numbers were, yes, you can build growth, but you've got to look at what are those assumptions of growth based on. And again, that's those signposts. I think it's a really great conversation you're having with the businesses, because it's a smart one to have.
Mm. I think too, again, those who are in the best position for the growth that's inevitably going to come are those who also put in that time in the early stages to put some definition around this stuff. So I think, something as simple again as the customer, those who had a customer persona, and we're all kind of familiar with that of, let's imagine who our customer is. It's Judy. She's aged between 40 to 60. She enjoys doing this. Her buying decisions are based on this. You put a persona around who that customer is. For businesses that have done that, all they need to do is open the top drawer, pull that out, brush it off, and say, what does Judy look like now post-corona?
Yeah.
Right? Have her buying decisions changed at all? Is she spending more? Is she spending less? What are her decisions based on? Where's she getting her media from? Is she scared? Is she not? Is she likely to come straight out onto the market? These things you can do as long as you've got a template to work on. And if you don't have that, now's a good time to be doing that. Yeah. To start to picture what that looks like, because ultimately, like I said, the signposts are going to be different for every business. But if you can understand and define some of this, as those restrictions ease off, you can look at it and say, aha, that's going to impact Judy by this. And so my answer to that as a business is to do this. And I think that's all it is. And, I sort of refer to it as the pillow time. But, if you don't have the headspace and the chaos of day-to-day decisions, then make that your pillow time. Put your head on the pillow and think about this stuff. Because if you're not, no one is. Your customer doesn't care.
I'm describing a couple of times by describing, because you keep talking about this fictional customer, Judy. And I can guarantee the Judy I've got in mind as the customer avatar, as you know, she'd be off Corona beer and she'd be onto wine, right? Judge Judy with a wine challenge, if that's the Judy avatar.
So I reckon the Judy we were just talking about actually tapped in and decided to cut off the broadcast just to have her Judy way. Yeah. Jeez. Okay, technology, take two. Let's see how we go. So you were saying, Mark, just in terms of your business and reaction now, yeah?
Yes. You were talking there before about taking that customer avatar out, dust it off, and where'd you go from here? And I could definitely see that if I make it real about my own business, I can see that for sure. There's certain avatar customers I've got where this digital world will be a new normal for them, where there's certain things that there's going to be pains and solutions that we can operate through digital solutions rather than always being live. So it's identifying which parts of my customer base that's going to be applicable to, and I've already kind of identified some of that versus those live events. And I think this is what you're talking about with your own, with the coaching you're doing with all those other SMEs, Chris. It's the same thing. Pulling out your customer, all the different avatars, starting to have a look and rethinking and rejigging what is your solution potentially going to be. But even then, you've just got to still go back to drawing board and have deeper quality conversations, because their worlds may have changed as well. Until you really know what's going on for them, you're going to have that deep dive conversation, ask questions, listen, and don't assume that what you think will be the fit will be. There's a good chance it might, but you're still going to have to bespoke and tailor for the new world for sure.
It's why I owe to have a crystal ball right now, yeah, to be able to see all this, because there's going to be certain businesses just thrive in this new world economy, and there's going to be those who kind of struggle along the way. And I think there's going to be a very manipulative opportunity for the larger organizations to start to dictate the way that we should feel about this experience, to help us through that uncertainty as we get back into the buying market and getting back into the new world. I think they'll take advantage of that. The same way that we all kind of sat back and looked at our politicians, for the answers that we kind of intuitively knew. Let's lock down this shit. But we were kind of looking and saying, hey, give us the answers. I think, unfortunately, some of the big brands are going to take advantage of that and actually start to really mold this new customer based on this level of uncertainty of what this new world looks like.
Yeah, well, hang on. I've got another field right there. Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Something said Something you said, I've got a gift for you. Hang on. So you said, oh, to have a crystal ball. Do you want a quartz one? Or would you like an amethyst one? So I'll go with my amethyst crystal ball.
Fantastic.
Well, here's what I would say is, you know, I think without none of us got that crystal ball, but I will say this is the idea of hibernation I find laughable. I should have a piece, I think, going live this week, actually, with one of the business mags. Hibernation is best left for the animals, my friend. We're not equipped for it. You know, hibernation is when you've built a fat supply that lasts you for months, right? In the business world, that's a cash supply you can thrive on without worrying, right? Or, you know, they hibernate in safety and numbers. We're hibernate in isolation. There's so many reasons why hibernation as an idea for your business is not a sound one until we emerge. So my crystal ball would say, don't do that. Don't do the hibernation. Like, survive as best you can. Start working now for the bounce back, but don't put your business into hibernation mode. That would be my crystal ball offering on that one.
Lots of chats coming up. And so, look, I reckon we might even try and chuck this one on live so people can see the conversations that we normally have anyway, our banter chats on a Sunday night. So we might chuck that live and see how it goes. We're playing around with this StreamYard platform. I think you can see the logo in the top corner there. It's interesting. I think great idea. You can actually take it out to different platforms and do some funky stuff with it. So I reckon over the next few weeks we might play around with this format a bit and see what we can do with it. And then I think, you know, like I said, the fact that they have actually used those words now, road to recovery, would kind of suggest that, you know, over the next couple of weeks, couple of months, that, you know, they're just a little bit less might actually, you know, start to go to plan. And it'll be great chats, I think, to kind of look back. I almost laugh at that conversation. You mentioned the travel industry one before, and if I recall right, when we did that, you know, we left our little isolation chamber and went straight down to the pub and had a meal. Yeah, and that just that seems like this foreign idea of a world that you know, bygone era, and that was what, 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Yeah, and that was before we went to this full lockdown thing. It'd be a few more than that. It was literally before they were just starting to gradually get to that full isolation. That hadn't quite kicked in, right?
Yeah, I reckon it was like 24, 48 hours after that. So
yeah, right. So within 2 days of that, yes.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So I think now's an interesting time for us to maybe share some of these conversations, because, you know, the chat we have this week, it's going to be completely different again next week and the week after that, and it's all changing so quickly. So I think
let me share an insight with you, Chris, actually. So Randall, who I work with, I write a lot for media, but Randall helps. He works in media. And he was explaining, like, over Christmas period, November, December, when we were writing for media, when the bushfires was on, right? We went from one crisis to the next. And it was quite hard writing for media at that time. But to give it some context, he was saying something like 40% of all airtime on mainstream media was dedicated to bushfires, which it felt like a lot more. But he was explaining it to give me context, because right now he's saying the mainstream media that he's dealing with, like TV, radio, is going, it's closer to 80-85% of it airtime is given to this. That just gives it perspective. If we thought that we're getting smashed with media stories on bushfire, like, this is just taking it to a whole another level. And part of the challenge with that with media is that the news, the story changes so rapidly. So there's, for example, there's 2 stories I've written and they've said, hey, we're going to run them. But every week they leave it, I've got to rewrite it. One of them is now, it is running, but it's because things move so fast. I've now done a 7th rewrite for that same piece in less than 2 weeks.
7.
Because 7, not full rewrites, but 7 adaptations. This piece is still solid and sound in its structure. But because this piece keeps moving daily because of certain factors, I just need to tweak certain bits. And I'm on to like version 7 in the 2 weeks we're waiting for it to actually go live. And it should go live this week. But if it doesn't go live again the next 2 or 3 days this week, I'll probably have to tweak it again. That's just giving you an idea, like how much, even when you're writing for a media piece, it's just a lot of adaptation because things are changing so rapidly.
And if I remember right too, when we were talking, I was saying to you as well, I was disappointed having come off the back of the bushfires and seen the best side of humanity with that, instant altruistic, how do we help response. And in the early stages when we were talking 4 weeks ago, we were still talking toilet paper and beating each other up in the supermarkets for supplies. But how quickly it's turned, yeah. Like you look at just what's happened in the last 4 weeks. Hey, great story for you. Clive and the work he's doing with Who's Cooking. So he's trying to get behind a lot of the local foodies, the guys who just love their food and do their job right, who are just close to closing their doors to pardon the pun, feed the family. Like it's almost ironic, but they he's getting behind them in a way to kind of give them an opportunity to get their name back out to market. And he did one on Saturday afternoon with the guys from Woodfire Pizza. Yes, they sold out.
That's fantastic.
And that was just a call out to all the local businesses sort of through LinkedIn to say, hey, look, if you can help these guys out, phone ahead, go down, grab a pizza. And the guys sent a message at about 7 o'clock at night saying, no more left, all gone. So I think, again, full circle.
Clive. Good job, Clive. And many people like Clive, but within the network doing exactly that. It's like, absolutely, how can you give a shout out, help, encourage, support, and do what we can? It makes a difference. And
I reckon too, if we're going to continue with these chats, let's try and get a few people on and have a chat to them on how they're actually coping with everything as well.
Well, we talked about that. Maybe we should just explain as well. So Chris and I have been talking for a while about doing a more regular podcast, and it just seemed now's a good time to do it. And let's share the background legacy of what we're going to brand that as well, Chris, right? Hawkman. So for those who know, it's Chris Hall and Mark Carter. And when we were talking about it, Chris highlighted that one of the characters, right, one of the superhero characters, Hawkman, his origin is a character called Carter Hall, which is perfect. So you're going to see Carter Hall Hawkman podcast. It's that kind of tongue-in-cheek poke at the legacy of Hawkman, the superhero character. So we'll brand out Hawkman. It's kind of innovative and kind of dual personalities of us coming out on that podcast. I think that's the pun behind it. So we're going to get cracking on that. We are going to get some guests in for sure. I like that idea, Chris.
Yeah, that'll work well. And I'll also get a light for my camera because at the moment I look like Rob the dentist. You can't see his face. Yeah.
Actually, you kind of look like the Hawk right now, silhouetted, because the top of the hair on your face looks like feathers sticking out from your head. Yeah, you go. Yeah, you kind of are the silhouette of the Hawkman is Chris. There we go.
Fantastic, Mark. I'll leave you off, mate. I'll talk during the week, and we'll get something up and running, and start to take it from there, and we'll get rid of that little StreamYard in the top corner as well, and pop something else.
Let's get Hawkman up there.
Terrific. Cheers, mate. I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers, then. Bye.
Thank you, Mark. Stay safe.